Our next keynote speaker is with us, another leader from the Queensland University of Technology, Marek Kowalkiewicz. He is the Professor and PwC Chair in Digital Economy at QUT, as well as a leader in Embracing the Digital Age research theme. And he takes a special lead in informing and influencing the robust digital economy in Australia and the region. Marek is with us this morning. We are very lucky to have him here with us, talking about innovation, academia, research, collaboration, partnerships, and bringing it all together to get stuff done, which is ultimately is what we're all here about today, turning ideas and inspiration into ignition and action. So Marek, could I welcome you to the stage? And colleagues, could you give him a very, very warm welcome? Thank you very much, Marek Kowalkiewicz.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All yours.
Good afternoon. May you live in interesting times, they say. May you live in interesting times. Apparently an ancient Chinese curse. It's actually not ancient, it's not Chinese, and I don't believe it's a curse. It's an opportunity. We do live in interesting times, don't we? We live in times where the way we live, work, and think really changes. Remember how, say, 30 or 20 years ago, if you wanted to, now that's a tongue twister, book a place somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Norway, in the middle of nowhere, 20, 30 years ago, that was probably a tricky thing to do, right? If you wanted to stay for a weekend in Norway in the middle of nowhere. These days, you already know what you would do, right? It would probably take you 15, 20 minutes to do it. So that the way we live changes, but also the way we think changes, because when you do it, you're going to trust a 4 or 5-star rating given to a stranger that you never met by strangers that you never met, right? And you're absolutely fine with it, right? Remember how they used to tell us that that brands matter? It's trust that matters. Brands are dead or are dying often. It's really, through the changes the way we think. It's really, really different. And it also changes, we see changes in the way we work. We can be practically anywhere and impact the world with what we're doing, whether it's innovation, whether it's business. So I was in Townsville yesterday, for instance, and I was making a point that there's this beautiful business called Safety Culture in Townsville. Some of you might have heard about them. And they're one of the largest businesses in the space of safety around the world and really pushing the technology. And they're in Townsville, right? There's no reason they need to be elsewhere. They're having fun there. They're enjoying their lives there. They're capitalizing on a trend that some of you would have heard about, so-called e-change. It should rhyme with sea change, right? And the whole idea is now, thanks to technology, we can live where we want to and still impact the world. Right? So interesting times. We are being scared every now and then that jobs are disappearing, right? They always have been disappearing. There are jobs that were there 20 years ago that are not here right now. It's probably, the impact is hard, but no one told us when we were born that it was going to be easy, right? So, hey, we need to think about it. I'm often thinking about my kids who turned 7 yesterday. I have twins. So I think my son will become a fashion designer for robots, for Android robots. No such job right now, but there was no designer of mobile phone skins or mobile phone covers 20 years ago. There will be fashion designers for robots. I know a bit about robots. I know they have no sense of fashion, so someone will have to do it. My daughter might become a human-robot relationship counselor, right? If we'll have those androids helping us with things, what happens if we argue with them? And we need someone to tell us how to deal with robots. Now I'm only half joking, right? Those jobs will be appearing. Managers of algorithms, there's already a need for that. In governments, in court proceedings, decisions need to be taken whether this particular algorithm can be applied. Can artificial intelligence support judges in their proceedings, for instance? Well, in the US, people think that artificial intelligence should not support judges, because the way AI works is you cannot really explain how a decision was made, and in some cases you really need to, right? So exciting, interesting times. I worked for QUT. I joined QUT almost 2 years ago from a small place in California called Mountain View, where I used to live, and I worked in Palo Alto. And I spent about 10 years working with one of the largest enterprise software companies, focusing on product and innovation for this company. But at some stage, I decided, it's better to move to academia, because that really enables completely new ways of collaborating. I'm not attached to a particular platform, particular vendor. I can work with organizations, with institutions, and help them reimagine the future without being constrained to a particular technology. So PwC Chair in Digital Economy is part of QUT, Business School, Science and Engineering Faculty, as well as Institute for Future Environment, which is a transdisciplinary arm of QUT. It's a partnership of QUT, PwC, Queensland Government, and Brisbane City Council, all of them coming together and saying, hey, let's explore what digital economy is, what it means for us, and also let's work together with individuals and organizations on capitalizing on the opportunities of digital economy. So I'm not your typical academic. I don't spend much time writing papers. I spend a lot of time working with organizations, with governments, with businesses, helping them reimagine the future. Often we share what we see that is happening in the digital economy. And now, please buckle up, because I'll race through those slides, because I want to finish in about 15 minutes. So what we're seeing is a shift from economy of corporations to economy of people. That's a shift that is happening already now. Economies of scale, where we produce as much as we can of what we're good at, are turning into mass personalization, at least perceived mass personalization. The Spotify music list that is designed just for me, right? So as a customer, I'm expecting this. What we're seeing is focus on cost efficiency shifting into revenue resilience. So what's the point of trying to minimize my costs of a particular revenue stream if that stream might be disrupted by someone else very soon? I should rather think about new potential revenue streams. When Netflix 20 years ago was established, they were a blockbuster, right? So they were a VHS DVD shop. And when they were successful, they decided, hey, we need to work on our revenue resilience. So they came up with this model of DVD by mail. When they were successful with the DVD by mail model, Netflix thought, okay, we need to work on revenue resilience. So they came up with a streaming model. And now, streaming, it's becoming a very typical thing that everyone does: Stan, Apple videos, and so on, Hulu, and the likes. So Netflix is working on new revenue streams, which in their case specifically is production of content, right? So they're going into this space, and who knows what's going to be the next one, because they seem to be successful. So I'm pretty sure they're already thinking about the next revenue stream there. Analysis intensive, right? So trying to understand future by looking into the past, which sort of sounds weird if you think about it, is turning into creating the future, right? So Alan Key, the former chief scientist of Apple, famously said that the best way of predicting the future is to create it. And that's exactly what a lot of organizations do these days, right? Normally, if I had more time, I would tell you a story about a turkey, a bird from Black Swan, Nassim Taleb's book. The turkey wakes up every day seeing food and having fun. Turkey becomes an analyst, develops a model, and basically concludes that every day will look the same, and then the butcher comes, right? So I will tell you that story, but I'm not going to tell you this story because we want to raise. But that's the fallacy of thinking like that. My job is often, when I think about my job, I think about computer games, and my job is to help organizations understand what's happening inside those black spots, right? So I work with a lot of CEOs who are very happy, sleep very well, because they don't know what they don't know, right? So my job is to tell them what might be lurking around the corner, and also where that corner could be, right? So we are in the age where we don't know where the disruption might be coming from. I'm telling QUT that some of our services could be disrupted by Virgin Airlines, and usually I get exactly the same reaction, which is, silence. It doesn't make any sense, does it? I'll tell you a bit later why Virgin Airlines could disrupt QUT, right? I'll get to it. So this is how I see my job. And I also work a lot on what we call digital literacy. So helping to understand how do we move as individuals, but also as organizations, up this pyramid where we start with digital literacy, how to set up a Facebook page, through digital behavior, what should I do or what could I do on this Facebook page, to digital impact or elegance, where I know how to write a tweet that gets retweeted 100,000 times. Now that's an example of an individual. I spend more time with organizations, so thinking what does it mean for organizations to be digitally literate, and so on and so on. Now the interesting and challenging part about this pyramid is also that it's a moving target. Right, so 20 years ago, digital literacy was something completely different for organization than it is today, and it will be very different 20 years from now. My kids will look at this device in 20 years from now and they'll say, wow, Dad was so old school, right? He used to have a device that had a screen. Remember how 20 years ago mobile phones had keyboards, right? He used to have a device that had a camera that he had to point at things, right? Not a 360 one, and so on, right? So it's a moving target, which makes things both challenging, but also exciting. I spend a lot of time working with organizations, helping them understand how the world changes. Often organizations still provide services for the lady in the middle, without remembering that there's a shift in expectations, right? I love the world that the lady is living in. Nothing against it. I actually think it's really good, right? To enjoy the moment and appreciate it. But that's not the theme of my presentation. The point is this is what is happening, right? And how do we spot those? How do we spot those trends in business, technology, society? How do we understand what they mean for us as an organization? And then how do we decide what we do about them, right? So often, I don't have this photo in my slide, but often I show people a photo of a lady driving a car with a mobile phone in her hand and a coffee cup, and I ask them what's wrong with this photo, and everyone correctly tells me distracted driving. And then I ask them, so what is she distracted by or with? And people say, well, the coffee and the mobile phone. And then, and then I say, no, she's distracted with the car, or the car is the distraction. And rather than trying to remove the cup or the phone from her hand, we should be removing the car from the picture, right? Because, well, I had to drive here, not that I love driving, right? there was no other option effectively, right? So what do we do about it? And then, when we look sort of beyond the surface, we start to understand that, hey, self-driving cars could be a solution here, right? Because then, the distraction is removed. But I also like to have this, plot twists in my presentations, and then I ask people, well, is this really the case? Is this what Google is trying to do here? Just remove distractions. The point is, a self-driving car has a screen in it, and whoever owns that screen will own interactions with the person who spends maybe up to an hour a day in this box or pod or whatever you would call it. And so it might be the mobile phone of the future, right? We don't know. There were no mobile phones, say 30 years ago. Maybe there will be no mobile phones in 30 years as well, and there will be completely new channels, right? So I spend a lot of time working with organizations and really challenging the way they think, and really translating it into action, right? So I recently shot an email to about 30, 40 CEOs that I work with. That's the research partnership with organization, and I asked them, why do they work with me, right? It's kind of a strange question to ask, but I really wanted to hear from them. And the interesting part was no one, not a single person, came to me and said, we have a problem and we need you to solve that problem, which is the typical thinking, when you think about university-industry collaboration. They come to university because they want to be challenged, they want to be inspired. They might have some solutions, but they want them to be validated. Sometimes they think they have a problem, but they want us to look into that problem and tell them whether this is really a problem, or we should take a few steps back and solve a slightly different problem, right? So I like to call it purpose-led innovation, right? So we really try to understand why we're doing something before we solve a problem, right? So removing a car from that photo that I told you about, maybe that's not a solution, right? Maybe the entire problem is somewhere else. We need to understand why, or where is this lady going, right? So it's an interesting one, and a lot of people, including me, are always challenged by the notion of having to be creative, right? So we're told to be creative, we're told to think outside the box, we're told to brainstorm. These are meaningless terms to me. I don't really know what creativity means. There are people who know, I don't. I don't understand what it means to think outside the box. What I do understand is that if I have my box, I can make it bigger and then think within that box. I feel very comfortable like that. Also, I don't like brainstorming because brainstorming is chaos, and I don't know whether I'm getting closer to a solution. So I like to follow some templates. Bit of an engineering mind, if you will. So this photo is showing you an example. Sorry, this slide is showing you an example of a couple of so-called ideation lenses that we use in my team, where when we work with organizations, we say, hey, oppositional thinking. I'm an organization and I charge my customers at the moment. And this is, and I need to change something about it. Then we ask a question, how about you flip the problem and you start paying your customers for the same service, right? Sounds weird, but I'll give you maybe two examples. Now, one example and then one suggestion. There's a startup in Australia called Carhood, like neighborhood for cars. And they exactly, we worked with them. They addressed that problem exactly like that. They thought, our airport car parks are very expensive. Typical innovation is how do we lower the costs, have coupons, get people more excited. But how about we actually paid people for parking, right? So with this, then we start to think, how do we make it happen, right? And the Airbnb model is the one that works here, right? So people park a car and then you rent it out to others. People have to be happy with that, and we know from Airbnb that it works for some people. So that's a model, right? We're working with Brisbane Airport Corporation, and I cannot really tell you too much about it, but we're exploring this case. Right now, as you know, every plane that lands at an airport, they have to pay to the airport, pay money to the airport, right? That's reflected in the taxes and fees that you have on your flight tickets. We're starting to ask ourselves, could we actually flip that model, right? So that's oppositional thinking. Derive is more like, hey, we're trying to learn from others. Queensland Urban Utilities, so I work with them. We asked, how would Google, so Derive is all about learning from others, how would Google run Queensland Urban Utilities? And then the answer was, well, they would make water and sewage delivery and taking it away free of charge. But they would try to collect as much data as possible about the customers and then sell it to advertisers, right? Or monetize it somehow. That's how we started. It might sound a bit immature. We spent a bit more time on that. We looked into the smart meters that they have. We took a smart meter. We brought researchers who are working on groundbreaking sensors at QUT, and we concluded that there's a possibility to create a sensor that you could put on a sewage pipe that would, track some of the sort of properties of your sewage, and that would help QU learn a bit more about the customers. But we weren't too happy with it just yet. We decided to move that sensor upstream, if you will, and install it in everyone's toilet. Everyone could install it in everyone's toilet, right, if they wanted to, right? Because otherwise it's very creepy. So you have this sensor that you could put into it. The project is called just like Fitbit, but starts with SH internally at QU. And it's all about scanning some markers like sugar levels or blood traces in whatever is dropped or poured into the toilet. And suddenly, QU thinks, okay, now we're a data platform, and we could allow our customers to allow their GPs to read that data so that, a GP could maybe spot something way before any actual symptoms are popping up, right? This was then turned into a business. A couple of EMBA students from QUT created a startup, partner with QU. They received 100K in funding from Queensland Health, and because Queensland Health believes that it's a great idea for remote regional Queensland, even for public toilets, just for Queensland Health to understand what might be happening in communities so that they can proactively plan delivery of services in future. All right? Enhance is all about looking at the processes and trying to streamline them. I'm going to skip that, but you're getting the point, right? We're not brainstorming ever in my team, right? We have all sorts of lenses here, and we just follow them. We ask very structured questions. So that's the smart toilet. We have a website for this one. These are the students who got the funding. See, I had some slides, right, for it. That's another one that we work on. How can I be faster than my customers as an organization, given what I know about them, given the digital footprints that I have about them, and then if I know a bit about them, I'm sorry, that was me. Could I forecast what's happening in their lives? So, could I, maybe as a government, as a proactive government, could I forecast that Marek is going to become jobless because he's a watchmaker, and in 5 years, 97% of job makers will be jobless, watchmakers will be jobless. So could I start offering some proactive services to Marek already now, like an upskilling and so on, before it really becomes a problem, right? And as you know, that is a costly problem. Could I, if I'm a TMR, Transport and Main Roads, could I, that's an easy one. Could you please send me a new driver's license before the previous one expires, just like my bank does with my credit card, right? You already know everything about me, right? Because I shared it in my tax returns and my passport applications and photos and so on. I don't care that it's federal and state and local government, right? As a citizen, right? So how could we explore those? And we are doing a lot of it, actually. And then action, how could I detect that something is happening about it, right? That Marek is maybe picking up a handset and calling the government. And then I'm giving you examples of government, but it could be also businesses. Could I be a recommender who just says, hey, Marek, you allowed me to analyze your information. This is what I found out. This is what's happening in your life. Just be aware that these are your options. Could I be an assistant, which is a bit like say ATO does that quite well, which is, hey, here's the information that I collected about your tax situation. It's pre-filled. If you're okay with it, just press here and you can submit or you can modify it. Or could I be an autopilot where I don't even talk to Marek anymore, I just do some things by default, and there is some cooling off period where maybe Marek is an anarchist and says, I don't want anything to do with the government, so I could still cancel that service, right? But we're exploring this a lot, and so I'm very glad to show you this screenshot, and I know that the text is a bit small, but this is, we've been working a lot with one-stop shop services of Queensland government, and they basically are now using the same language. We're talking about personalized and proactive services that are being delivered to citizens. And similarly, we're working with a number of organizations. I cannot name too many of them, but Queensland Urban Utilities, Australia Post are a couple of big ones. We work with a couple of large superannuation funds looking into those proactive services. And again, our job is to inspire them, to broaden their horizons, and also make them look outside of their industries, right? So I'll get to that Virgin Alliance example in a while. Don't read this slide. The point is we run it in a model of so-called innovation sprints, where our partners come to us with a broad statement of a challenge. And over a 6 weeks period, we try to understand what the real problem is. Then we explore opportunities in this space. We are very much opportunity-driven and not problem-driven. We work together on solutions, and then we work together on implementing those solutions, to the point that my brief to my team is to make sure that our customers and clients believe that they came up with those ideas, because then we don't have a problem of non-invented here. Right? So that's, takes a bit of, it's not that easy as an academic, for a lot of academics to sort of abandon the baby, if you will, in some ways, but that's how we work. Okay, so we do have some colorful spaces. We bring stakeholders together a lot. It's all about co-creation, co-innovation. That's really what I wanted to stress here, that actually, universities are a good place to be inspired. Now, because I'm placed in Institute for Future Environments at QUT, we are a so-called transdisciplinary group, which means we are across the entire university. If I have an innovation sprint like that for 6 weeks, and 2 weeks are extremely, extremely intensive and active, if on day 3, at 10:15 a.m., we think, working on sort of water utilities, we think some legislative issues might arise. The beautiful thing of being at a university is at 10:15, this is the question. At 10:20, I'm knocking on at some academic's door, and that academic is focusing on this, has been focusing on it for years. Then 5 minutes later, I have that academic in our room, and we're interviewing them, and we're learning from them. And 10 minutes later, we have an answer, right? So it's like a free ride. I'm tapping into, dozens and hundreds of academics at a university whenever this is happening, which is beautiful. And honestly, it cannot happen anywhere else at this pace, right? So it's I'm very happy to or glad to have this. Let's call it what it is, competitive advantage, right? So I have this this huge collective brain there. A couple of examples of so want to start a cafe in Brisbane or Logan? Well, there's a website that was part of the innovation sprints. If you type it in Google, opening a cafe in Logan, this will be in top results. It's a beta application. Well, no, I'll get to the beta one. Forget it for a second. It's an application where you can go. It's a very conversational interface. It will ask you a few questions like outdoors, indoors, alcohol or not, food or not, and so on and so on. After a few questions, you'll start getting answers in a very proactive way. Well, these are the licenses you need to apply for. This is how long it will take. This is how much it might cost. Big asterisk there saying that this is just based on past information, and so on and so on. So the moment you have it, this is an example of our joint work. Another example is Grant Finder, where in one place, and again you have to answer a few questions, you will get full information about what grants are available to you, right? So it's a joint partnership, right? In this particular case with a government. Now let me get back to the beta one, because I'm very passionate about it. We all know about the census and what happened. I think it was absolutely fine, to be very frank with you. As a person who has spent most of my life in the digital space, I saw how Twitter was failing every day in the early days of Twitter, and we had this big whale picture, some of you might remember, whenever Twitter was down. Facebook, well, not so often, but it used to be down a couple of times as well. That's a fairly typical thing. So if an organization pushes the technology limits, we as customers are actually pretty much okay with the fact that it sometimes goes down, as long as the messaging is right? So Google had a beta on their website, and Google Mail, right? They removed it only a couple of years ago. Twitter the same. So it could have been the same with census. The government could have said, hey, we're testing something completely new here. If it fails, bear with us. We still have a backup plan, which is paper, which is standard, which is how we've been doing it. And by the way, this is how I did my census, right? Use the paper forms. But now somehow we had to, have scapegoats and say, this is whatever, right? So I'm very proud. Sorry, I'm very proud of the yellow bar, which is here, that the Queensland government put up there on the screen, which says, hey, we're trying something new here. If it doesn't work. Then hey, we can fix it, right? So let me wrap up by just showing a couple of additional slides. Whatever we do, we prepare tools for our partners, for the public. You can go to our website. I'll show you that on the last slide. How do you design new services? How to design new approaches? We have trainings, so disruptive innovation leadership course. 3 buzzwords in 4 words. I'm very proud of it. We're running it. It's a 2-day course where we teach people how to think. Use those lenses that I showed you. Upcoming one is on the 13th and 14th of June, which is on just a few weeks. If you're interested in this one, we join forces with organizations by bringing students and organizations into Rome. Student design jams where we rethink how they work. We release a lot of research reports. Many of them are on our website. We record a lot of podcasts that you can listen to while you're driving a car, if you're still driving a car when you commute. And so focus on revenue resilience. Think what it means for your organization. You don't need to be creative to come up with great ideas. And not even just public services, but any services could be proactive, and think how you could do it. These are my contact details if you're interested. And do we still have a couple of minutes for questions?
A few questions.
Okay. Yes. Can we get a copy of these slides? I'm happy to I'm absolutely fine with it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Listen. Mm-hmm. Right, the Virgin story. So executive MBA students, when they join QUT, many of them don't join QUT to learn, but to build networks. Spend 3 years and meet people and so on, right? It's a fairly typical one. I don't think I have to explain it. Virgin could say, hey, Marek, if you share your LinkedIn profile with me, I'm going to tell you if there's someone from your LinkedIn network sitting on the same plane, or maybe not the immediate network, but the next one. Hey, Marek, there's a CEO on our plane. Would you like to pay $50 for an exit row seat, or maybe $100 for sitting next to a CEO, right? So it all depends on why people hire us. In this particular case, MBA students hire us to build networks. Virgin could help build networks as well, right? So that's the point. That's outside of the industry. The moment you focus on why people come to you, what is the job that arises in their life that causes them to come to you, this is where you can start thinking about completely different industries that are going to disrupt you, right? So Netflix is competing with sleep. That's what they're saying at the moment, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
Other questions?
Other questions?
One or two, perhaps.
1 or 2 questions? Anyone? 1 question? Yes.
How do you deal with people who continuously? How do you deal with people who are continuously saying that well, we've done this the same way all the time? Why should I change? How do you deal with those sorts of people?
That's an interesting one because maybe I'm in this lucky situation that usually people come to me and they already understand that they need to change, right? So that helps. But I guess what I do a lot. Actually, I do a lot of it. Probably once, twice a week, every week. I give presentations like this one. Now I mostly give them to sort of C-level executives. Because it's all about them understanding that they shouldn't be falling asleep at the wheel, and so then they need to spread that message in the organization. By the way, it's also very opportunistic on my end. If the CEOs, if the C-level executives do not buy into the innovation agenda, there's no way, based on my experience, maybe you have other examples, but based on my experience, there's no way grassroots innovation is going to succeed. Unless that grassroots innovation leaves the organization and starts a new business and so on, right? But within it, you need a minister, a mayor, a CEO to say, let's do it, let's go for it on a high level so that you innovate because of and not despite of the messaging that you're getting from the top. Yeah. Mm-hmm. One last question. Mm-hmm.
You do raise a point there, and that is that a lot of the disruption comes from startups and certainly from smaller organisations, and there's a move amongst large organisations now to break up their larger organisation into smaller units.
Yep.
Are you dealing with companies at that level? Are you seeing that happening here in Australia?
Yeah. So when I was with my previous employer in California, we did exactly that thing, right? So organization that has 70,000, 80,000 employees, we basically hired a garage in Los Altos, one of the places in California, and created a startup-like organization with the entire structure, right? So HR, anything. And it actually produced quite a lot of very interesting outcomes that are now products. The trick there was that they had to have direct access to the CEO, and in this particular case, one of the co-founders of the organization as well, and get that support. Now, to your question about Australia, I am seeing it as well. Even with Queensland Urban Utilities, one of the podcasts that I was mentioning, we were talking about a need for a new role in an organization that is called Chief Opportunity Officer, and we explain, why it's important and so on and so on. You know what? They're hiring now a Chief Opportunity Officer. So they came to us and said, help us write up the job description. So there's more and more organizations, even those that you would think are not extremely innovative, that are looking there. We still have a lot to do. Let's not sit on the laurels here, but I see some positive signs, definitely. Right? Thank you. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen. Marek Kowalkiewicz, ladies and gentlemen, that is an outstanding presentation, if I've ever seen one. Look at that, that's energy for you. Not only energy, and as Marek said, it's not just about, and he stands back from it, brainstorming and thinking differently and thinking outside the box. You can see how he is quite clear about applying discipline, about applying method and applying structure to your thinking so that you can take possibility and turn it into reality. You can take theory and turn it into practice. And that's what we really have to do. We have to keep thinking about that.